If you had the chance to meet your estranged son, what would you do? Hey oceanographers, want to watch a movie? So I've started to officially go through my requests, and the first one is by Douglas. I hope I pronounced that correctly. We are going to be talking about the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, an underappreciated masterpiece by Wes Anderson. Released in 2004, this film I think is starting to get a lot of retroactive attention and a greater audience. And I wanted to kind of look at the successes and design and just beauty of this film and talk about it with you all. So put your diving suits on and let's strap in and talk about The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. We begin this film with a showing of Steve Zissou's most recent documentary. In it, we learn about all the characters that we will be seeing on this journey and what they do around the ship. And I love that this is the way that they decided to introduce us to all of the characters. This documentary feels so raw and human, and I love that the sound design of it sounds as though the audio is being recorded on site instead of this constant clean-cut studio audio. Something else that made me giggle a little bit is the team of unpaid interns that Steve brings along on every single expedition. I'm glad to see that interns still aren't being paid between now and 2004. In this documentary, it is revealed that Esteban, one of Zissou's best friends, was eaten by a rare creature called a jaguar shark. And there's a Q&A that follows this showing where Zissou vows to destroy the shark that killed his best friend, despite people not being so thrilled about that. After this, we see that Mr. Jeff Goldblum himself is in this film, and he is going to be playing Zissou's rival, Captain Hennessy. And there's so much palpable tension between these two. They did a great job at providing that to the audiences because you can tell that there is this history of tension and resentment between them. Anyway, Zissou continues to exit the theater and Klaus's nephew ends up giving him a fish. And the design of the made-up animals in this film is something that I'll talk about later. It's so good. I love it so much. In this scene also, there is a man who keeps asking Zissou to sign different films that he owns, and that also made me giggle just a little bit. As Zissou's team exits the theater, we see this man who is heckling Zissou and questioning him about Esteban's death. And then there's this moment where this man asks, who is Zissou planning on killing next? And that causes his entire team to go and beat up this random man. We love loyalty in this house. This night of celebration continues on, and Zissou meets his estranged son, Ned. Ned wanted to meet Zissou after his mother has died and just start to try and form a relationship with him. And I love that Zissou, not for a second, questions it, and then when Ned comes up and he's like, I'm probably your son, he responds with, sure, I guess. And Owen Wilson and Bill Murray do such a good job at showing what that estranged father-son relationship looks like. We then are introduced to Zissou's boat, and I once again love that we can see all the different rooms and how they show us it as if it's a model of the boat. It's such a fun way to zoom around the different rooms and see everything that they put on there. It is also revealed that the rivalry between Hennessy and Zissou stems from the fact that Hennessy gets all the funding and grant money for oceanography, and Zissou has to scrap by. Also, Zissou stole Hennessy's wife, but that's not important. We don't need to talk about that. I really do love in this movie how grassroots and homemade the Zissou team feels. Like, they don't have the best equipment in the world, but they're all driven by this passion to find and explore the ocean. There's one night on the Zissou compound where a group of jellyfish washed up on the shore and they rush outside to investigate and film them. But they're corrected in their misidentification by Jane Winslet Richardson, who is a very pregnant reporter in this film. She's here to write an article about Zissou to sort of rebuild and rehabilitate his character and public image. That evening, Ned calls his job at the airport because he's a pilot and tells them that he is going to take a month leave to see through this project. And while he's doing this, he hears from down the hall Jane reading to her baby. And he doesn't tell her to be quiet or anything like that. He just sits with her and listens to her as she reads to her baby. And now we start to see 2 points of tension in this film. The first being Jane and Zissou. A quick summary of their relationship is essentially Zissou keeps hitting on her and she keeps rejecting him, and she keeps writing an article that is a bit critical of him and he does not like that. And then the other one is Klaus having this one-sided tension with Ned where he is jealous of Ned and Zissou's relationship and he confronts Ned about it. There's also this scene that happens where Zissou tells Ned that Jane is crazy for the article that she's writing, and in the same conversation tells Ned that he never reached out because he hates fathers and never wanted to be one, which I'm sure is just so good for your estranged son to hear. When financial crisis threatens the team's expedition, Ned decides that he is going to give up his entire inheritance so that Zissou can keep running. And there's a financial advisor who's assigned to this team, or a bond company stooge named Bill, who is sort of there to oversee what they are doing and making sure that they don't do anything illegal. And now that we have the problem of funding figured out, we see this little montage of everything getting on track and everyone's so happy to be around and doing this expedition. And during this, we see Ned find a $100 on the beach and give it to Jane as a little token of his affection. But this moment is shortly ended because Zissou shows up and pulls Ned back into training. As we move through this movie, we see Eleanor tell Zissou that she is not going to be going on this journey with him. She quits the documentary because she doesn't want to see anyone else die, especially not Ned. But because Zissou is so prideful, he decides to keep going on with it, even though multiple times it's been stated that Eleanor is the brains behind their team. Side note, there's a guy named Pele in this movie who sings David Bowie songs in Portuguese, and I just love him very much, and I think he's very good. Anyway, the team officially decides to begin their hunt for the jaguar shark. However, their journey decides to take a little detour when Zissou realizes that they don't have enough equipment to track the sharks. So what do? They decide to break into Captain Hennessy's secret research lab and steal a bunch of his equipment so that they are able to properly track the jaguar shark. And might I say, they do incredible with this raid. No one catches them, and they're able to successfully steal a ton of equipment to help in their operations, including an espresso machine. As the movie continues, we see Ned slowly become more and more of a leader for Team Zissou. He's clever, he's got great ideas, and he wants to put in the work to lead this team and to help find this shark. To the point where Zissou pulls him aside and tells Ned that if he has any more smart ideas, he needs to tell Zissou because he wants to see smart around Jane. There's another cute little moment between Ned and Jane where Ned stole the $100 that he gave her back so that he could then use peppermint dental floss to make a little necklace out of it and give it back to her. It's just very cute and very sweet, and I love these two so much. On a less wholesome note, Zissou broke into Jane's cabin and decided to read the article that she is writing about him, and no one involved in that is particularly happy. Regardless, the next day, the team decides to go and do a dive to gather some footage for the documentary because something popped up on their radar. And Zissou is so determined to show that he is the superior oceanographer that he brags to Jane about how their helmets have antennas so that they can pump music through them. And something that I love is that everything that is made up in the ocean looks so whimsical, and it's so good. And while they're diving, there's this moment where Ned asks if he can call Zissou dad, to which he's like immediately shot down. But you don't sit in that discomfort for too long because they discover the thing that they saw on their radar was a sunken plane. And I think it's fascinating watching how Zissou acts towards his crew because he thinks that he is the smartest, best person on this team, and he's not. He thinks that he's this alluring individual that every woman will be swooned by, but again, He's not. And this is shown whenever Zissou is around Jane because he's outwardly competing for her affection and most of the time being pretty rude, but she constantly rejects him in favor of Ned's much more sweeter and compassionate affection. There's this moment where Ned is listening to Jane's stomach and he says that he thinks that she'll be a very good single mother. And it's just so sweet that they're able to build this romance despite all the chaos that is happening around them. And speaking of chaos, this particular interaction happened while Ned was supposed to be on lookout for any bad guys since they're sailing through uncharted and dangerous waters. But since he was with Jane, pirates get on the ship. When the pirates are on board the ship, they steal Ned's entire inheritance and the financial advisor, Bill. And during this scene, I realized that Matthew Gray Gubler is in this movie. He's one of the interns. His name is Nico, and I only realized that he was in this movie because he gets stabbed in this scene. Anyway, after this raid, Zissou says that anyone who wants to quit the project can, and this includes all of the interns except Nico and Jane, all wanting to quit. Also, because the pirate raid damaged the ship so much, Hennessy shows up and decides to give them a tow to where Hennessy's villa is for a fee. It turns out Eleanor is staying at this villa, and her and Zissou have this interesting conversation where Zissou's facade is starting to crack and he's starting to have this identity crisis. He realizes that he might be too old for everything that has happened, and Eleanor is right about everything. She's always been right. But he's so determined to catch this jaguar shark that he continues on this expedition. And when he gets back on the boat, he catches Ned and Jane together in Jane's cabin, which causes another fight between Ned and Zissou, where Ned is just trying to protect him and Jane while Zissou is saying these horrible things about her. And this all culminates to Ned saying that he is so disappointed in Zissou and that he regrets wanting to call him dad. Absolutely brutal stuff. But Eleanor showed up and she's going to help Team Zissou find Bill. She was able to kind of triangulate his location due to a phone call that she received, and this leads to Zissou calling her the brains of the operation. And while they're traveling to where Bill might be kept, there is this scene between Jane and Eleanor where Eleanor reveals that there is no way that Zissou could be Ned's father because he shoots blanks. But this information is never relayed to Zissou and Ned, who are still acting like this weird father-son dynamic. As the team is arriving at the Ping Islands, where they believe Bill is being held, they see that Hennessy's boat has sunk and that his entire crew is dead, which is a little coconuts for them to see, but they keep powering forward, and Zissou leads his team to a hotel where they believe Bill is held. And while on this mission, Klaus reveals to Zissou that the reason why he's been so jealous of Ned is because he thought of Esteban and Zissou as his dads, which is just so... I love Klaus so much. He's just so sweet. And during this raid, we have another identity crisis from Zissou where he finally is acknowledging that he's washed up, but he starts to heal his relationship with Ned again and says that Ned can call him Papa Steve. This short-lived, semi-emotional moment, though, is broken up by Klaus saying that they found where Bill is. And through a series of action-packed events and explosions, the Zissou team manages to escape this island with their entire team plus Bill and Hennessy. Once they're back on the ship, the team decides to push forward and find this shark. They've come this far, why not keep going? So what Zissou and Ned decide to do is they take off in the helicopter to try and go to the last known location of the shark and see if any clues might be there. And during this flight, Zissou reveals to Ned that he kept the letter that Ned wrote to him when he was 11. And it's this very nice moment that parallels the previous scene where Ned talks about if Zissou remembers the letter that he wrote to Zissou. Of course, there is peril in this scene, and a piece of the helicopter propeller ends up falling and the two crash into the ocean. And when they crash, Zissou has this flashback to when he first saw Ned at his screening, and that fills him with the need to go and find where Ned is. But it's too late. Ned was severely injured in the crash and died of his injuries. And in my heart of hearts when I watched this, I was like, oh, they'll bring him back. There's no way he's like permanently dead. No, he is permanently dead. He dies in this moment. After returning to the ship and burying Ned at sea, Zissou finally has this moment of humility where he acknowledges that he is such a deeply flawed individual. And as he's acknowledging this, the radar finally picks up the jaguar shark. He is determined to catch it, and the entire team decides to go and support him on this one last journey. And this scene that follows is one of my top 3 favorite scenes from a Wes Anderson film. As the team dives into a trench, we see Zissou park the sub and wait for the tiger shark to show up. There's a sense of calm through the entire sub where people are just waiting to see if the jaguar shark will show up. There's this herd of pink glowing fish that surround the sub, and when it clears, we see it. The jaguar shark was real after all, and it swims all around the sub, showing off to everyone inside. And it's this truly beautifully somber experience because Zissou is simultaneously being validated in proving that this creature existed, but it's mixed with this grief of all the lives that were lost to find this creature. And for the first time in this film, Zissou breaks down and cries, and he has this moment of humility and humanity where the mask completely slips off. It is truly such an incredible scene. I love it so much. This movie closes with the documentary of this particular expedition being dedicated to Ned. We notice, though, that Zissou is not watching this documentary. He is outside of the theater smoking, and people are taking pictures of him, sitting and smoking. Klaus's nephew comes out, and Zissou gives him the ring that Ned wore that was a Zissou Society ring. And as the credits roll, Zissou puts Klaus's nephew on his shoulders, and the team walks off, and thus ends the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. And like I said in the beginning of this video, this movie has retroactively gained a following, so let's talk about how it was received when it first came out. Just real quick. The budget for this movie was $50 million, and it made $34.8 million. Some maybe we'll call that a flop. On IMDb, this film has a 7.2 out of 10 with over 207,000 reviews and a Metascore of 62. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 57% on the tomato reader and an audience score of 82%. Broadly speaking, the critics weren't thrilled about the deadpan delivery of the majority of the lines in this film. And with reception like this, I think there needs to be a larger conversation about how Wes Anderson designs his films. I think that the style of speech that was chosen for this film is something that is so associated with Wes Anderson. It's like a calling card for him. Everyone in this world that he builds takes the whimsy around them and treats it as though it's reality, and all the shenanigans that happened are something that is very serious to them. I think it's a really fascinating acting style where you take everything around you so incredibly seriously and you don't kind of acknowledge the whimsy that is there and the fantasy. I think because the characters take every bit of fantasy as something that is very real and very serious in their lives, it adds to this world that he builds so well. And also, the animation of all the fake sea creatures in this movie is I love it so much. The blend between the reality and the actors talking mixed with this like stop motion, claymation sort of animation style for these animals is so gorgeous. It is truly beautiful. The sea creatures in this movie all have this beautiful, beautiful design that, yes, feel fantastical, but it's so remarkable to watch it come together. And I fully believe that the success of a film cannot be defined solely on financial success. I think that that's something that Wes Anderson focuses on quite a bit with his films, is not necessarily the financial success that they will garner, but the impact that he's trying to have. While at the time it came out, The Life Aquatic didn't have the best reception, I think over time people have come to appreciate this film. It's similar to Fantastic Mr. Fox, where it has this very grounded in reality, very tangible sort of characters that we can identify with. Throughout this entire film, Steve Zissou is this incredibly narcissistic and cocky and detached individual. He believes what happens to him so full of conviction that he cannot be convinced of any other possibility. And he doesn't necessarily grieve anything that has happened to him in his life because he feels as though he is doing something great. He feels like he's doing this incredible service to the world. In the final scene with the jaguar shark, it's this moment where he is face to face with the emotions of his friend's passing and Ned's passing. And there's this line that he says when he sees the shark, and he says, "I wonder if it remembers me." And there's something so beautiful in that line because at the end of the day, it shows what Zissou's motivations are. He wants to be remembered. He wants to have an impact on the world. And I think that that is the moment where his mask fully slips off and you can see the insecurities behind him. The Life Aquatic is truly fascinating because it brings up this conversation surrounding regret and old age and that fear of not doing enough in the time that you have. And while you can tell that Steve Zissou has those fears, there's also this other side of it where you have the chance to fix relationships and you have that second chance to really heal and to come together. We see this with two characters that Zissou interacts with, Ned and Eleanor. With Ned, he completely cut ties with his son because he didn't want to come to the conclusion that he was his father. And then when he was confronted with Ned, he was able to start developing that relationship and was given a second chance. And with Eleanor, his cockiness and entitlement pushed her away so much that he didn't have her anymore to rely on, and it wasn't until she was gone that he realized how much he needed her. And so when she comes back, he's given again this second chance to build the life that not only he wants, but she also wants. And I think that the sound design of this film also lends to being such a strong narrative device. Like I said in the beginning, the way that they film this documentary and the documentary portions of this movie, it feels very grassroots and they're using what they can to get by. But later in this film, when Ned dies, it's one of those moments where there is no sound and he has to sort of face the fact that he is with the man that he thought might be his son. I think it's this really powerful moment where Zissou starts to realize how entitled he has been and how risky he has been, where he put his son in a position where he died for him. And I think that the silence really adds to the weight of that realization. It's such an incredibly powerful scene. It's truly such a beautiful movie about mortality and coming to understand that your self-destructive tendencies not only harm you, but the people around you. So many people in this movie were hurt because of the way that Zissou was grieving with the loss of his friend. And there is no right way to grieve, and I think that most people jump to anger or revenge when it comes to death. It's just this fascinating story to unravel, and I truly encourage all of you to watch it if you haven't. We can have that conversation in the comments section. I'm curious to know if any of you have seen this. What did you think of the movie? And if you haven't watched it yet, hey, go watch that. It's very good. I highly recommend it. And if you made it to the end of the video, dude, thank you so much. Like I said in my Coyote Lake video, that one was kind of short, so I wanted to put another one out and also start getting to requests because I know those have been sitting for quite some time. Don't worry, they've been marinating. Like I said, thank you, Douglas, for requesting this video. I still don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but I had a lot of fun talking about this movie. If you put in a request, don't worry. Don't worry. I will get to it soon. Look, I'm just one person. I'm trying. And I hope that this video inspired you to watch this film. I think something that is so underappreciated is going back to content from our past to just analyze it and really look at it through an older lens. And I think that because I watched this while I was older, I was able to identify so much more with the themes of this movie. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll send a little smooch your way, and I'll see you next time.